So, it looks like we're getting an Iron Lung movie starring Markiplier as John Iron Lung and Jacksepticeye as the fish. Or maybe scratch that last part, but it does look like Jacksepticeye is still gonna be in the movie. Hey everyone, Effie here, back with yet another Iron Lung video. That makes it what? 4 videos at this point? I did an initial impressions video when the game first came out, a big hacking expose showing the game's secrets a couple months later, and just a few weeks ago I released a video alongside the first publicly available mod that I created for the game. Now, I was just as surprised as all of you to see that big movie announcement shortly after my last video came out. I probably would have jumped on the opportunity to make this video a lot sooner, but I was already in the midst of another project. So here we are now, just a couple weeks later with only that very short teaser video and a couple tweets to go off of. However, since I love researching stuff like this, I was able to do a bit of digging and find some details about the movie that weren't widely known. But before I reveal my findings from that, let's set the stage a bit. If you haven't heard of Markiplier before this, he's basically one of the largest and most successful gaming YouTubers on the site. I'm not exactly a Markiplier historian, but I know that his channel skyrocketed in popularity alongside Five Nights at Freddy's back in the day. Nowadays, he seems to mostly do long play style gaming videos, mostly focused on horror games, with a bit of miscellaneous content in between. Other than that, he's been in podcasts, limited series, and he even had a YouTube Red show. Browsing through his IMDb page, he does seem to have a bit more experience with film production than your average YouTuber. Not to say he's got Hollywood credits or anything, but I think with a competent team behind him, he'd be perfectly capable of pulling off an Iron Lung movie. As for me, I've only seen a handful of his videos over the years. Not that I dislike him or anything, he actually seems like a pretty chill dude. I just don't watch much long play gaming content. I mean, 2-hour facecam video of a new game? No thanks. On the other hand, 2-hour video essay of a long dead game? Sign me up. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not as worried about Markiplier acting in an Iron Lung movie as some random commenters are. Like I said before, he's got the chops to play John Iron Lung, and the team behind him will really make or break that. Speaking of which, I decided to look into who's actually involved with this production. We know that Mark and Jack are in the movie, and even David, the creator of the game, gets a small cameo. But there's one other major role, played by Caroline Kaplan, a small TV actress who's been in shows like Proof and Orange is the New Black. Thinking about the actual game, there's only 2 obvious roles that come to mind, the prisoner in the sub and the voice on the radio. Given the casting, Mark is obviously the prisoner, while either Jack or Caroline could be the voice on the radio. David himself said that Jack would be the voice on speaker number 2, which could be for real, or it could just be another troll post. There's a lot of directions they could take with a third actor, but thinking on it for a while, there's just a couple main possibilities. First of all, they could just be another voice on the radio. This is simple, but not too interesting. On the other hand, the movie could make use of flashbacks to pull the location out of this single room sub. Lots of one-room movies make use of flashbacks to break things up and keep the single location from growing stale. Alternatively, one of the extra characters could appear as a hallucination that the prisoner sees inside the sub. Just like the use of flashbacks, hallucinations would allow them to bring other characters into this otherwise lonely movie. Of course, it could be something else altogether, but given the size and scope of this project, if I had to bet, it'd be one of these 3 options. Speaking of scope, we don't know the budget behind this, but it does seem like Mark is largely self-funding the project. Since it's intended to be a theatrical release, they'll probably pair with a distribution company who may provide a little bit of extra funding on top. Looking at the cast and crew, there's actually quite a lot of people working on this movie, and those are just the ones currently listed on IMDb. Far from any solo YouTube videos or 5-person podcasts, this is a full-blown production crew. Looking into their backgrounds, most of the cast and crews have worked on some small shows, but nothing too notable. The most recognizable resume probably belongs to their art director, who worked on a couple of moderately successful horror films. Not any blockbusters, mind you, but having an art director who's worked on some mainstream horror is definitely a positive here. And while we're on the topic, I can't forget to mention that Andrew Hulshult is creating an original soundtrack for the movie. Looking at his past works reveals that he's had his hand in quite a lot of indie boomer shooters, as well as some AAA titles like Doom Eternal. Do I expect some speaker-thumping metal music to be playing in Iron Lung? Well, No, but I'm sure he'll nail the soundtrack either way. Moving on from the cast and crew, I was able to dig up a few more details shared by David and his co-workers. Dave Oshry, the head of New Blood Games, mentioned that the studio has massive industrial-sized tanks of blood on set. David followed this up saying, "Y'all ever in a situation where you're like, maybe this is too much blood?" So it's safe to assume we'll be seeing some practical effects, and not just CGI like you might expect in a low-budget indie film. Of course, the monster is still pretty likely to be CGI, but you never know how they'll end up depicting it in the movie. At least we know that David himself won't be playing the fish because, quote, "that would be too scary." The last interesting tweet I found was David posting that he accidentally wore a Twin Peaks meme shirt to a lunch with Markiplier and Robert Rodriguez. Now, I guess there could be other Robert Rodriguez's, but the only one I know of is big-time director Robert Rodriguez. You know, the guy who directed classics like From Dusk Till Dawn, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and, Spy Kids? Nowhere is his name actually attached to this movie, so it could just be a red herring, but I thought it was interesting at the least. But I think that's enough talk about film production, crews, rumors, and all the what ifs I could think of. The real what if I want to know is, what if Wes Anderson directed Iron Lung? Luckily, Kino Fubino answered that for us. That's all well and good, but we know that this movie hinges on fear. So how do you really scare the new generation? In theory, it's pretty simple. You put them in a submarine where the door has been sealed shut and... Actually, I'm not going to read all that, but thanks for cramming the plot synopsis into a meme format, anonymous Iron Lung poster. But did you know this is actually the second Iron Lung movie? Yes, we did have an iron submarine descending into an ocean of blood before this. Looking back on it, it's pretty clear now that the prisoner in Iron Lung is just an analog for Arnold from the Magic School Bus. Anyways, I think that's enough Iron Lung for one day. I'm cautiously optimistic for the movie, and I really hope they manage to pull it off. If it succeeds, it'll be a great signal to the film industry that people want to see more indie game adaptations, opening them up to a much wider audience. If you have any Iron Lung theories of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments. But until they release any more info on the movie, all we can do is wait. So until next time, have a good one, folks.